So hello everyone, welcome to VizConnect, connecting you with the art of data visualization and storytelling. My name is Sagar Kapoor. I'm part of customer success team at Tableau. So VizConnect is your weekly global Tableau community call, which inspires you, motivates you to go ahead, start your journey with Tableau and participate in a Tableau community events. All the sessions which are presented in VizConnect are uploaded to our YouTube channel. Go ahead, subscribe to it. Some great content is waiting for you. We have a LinkedIn group. Go ahead, connect with each other, learn from each other, and get started with the data fam. All the information about the VizConnect sessions are posted into our LinkedIn group. With that, let me go ahead and talk about our Tableau conference. So if you're not registered for the Tableau conference, it's coming 9 to 11th November for US, 10 to 12th for EMEA and APAC. So whichever region you are based out of, just go ahead and register, and some great content is waiting for you. And I am excited about the Tableau conference. And if it's your first, I think it will be great for you to go ahead and register for it. With that, let me go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. His name is Steve Adams. Steve is passionate about helping organizations make better decisions. Having worked as a director of business analytics in a multinational enterprise, he now works with public and private sector organizations, enabling them to scale out Tableau through training and coaching solutions. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Steve to talk about the 3-2-1 of enabling teams to build dashboards that drive action quickly and repeatedly. Steve, over to you.
Hi, thanks. Just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen, Steve.
Cool. So hi everybody. Yeah, as Steve Adams, thank you very much, Sagar, for the introduction there. I work with VizDJ.com, so we're founded to help organizations scale up Tableau cost effectively. I'm going to break a cardinal sin today when I'm presenting on Tableau, and I'm not going to present any Tableau. I don't apologize for that. I see a lot of training sessions which are fantastic. I'm not going to go through a Tableau learning session from that perspective. What I'm going to focus on today, though, is enabling your organization to speed up the delivery of actionable dashboards both quickly and repeatedly. So the goal of this training is very much to go through the 3 key principles to building dashboards that drive decision making and action in your organization. If you stay to the end of this, then you will have a list of processes and recommendations which you can implement within your organization to achieve that. I'm going to put this into the context of what I call the dashboard maturity pyramid. At the bottom of that pyramid, we are normally delivering statistics, and that's maybe tables of numbers. They're the sorts of reports which we on page 27, our users are turning to every month because they know what that table of information is, and that's where they're looking for information. But there's no insights on that table. We have to then provide an analytical layer on top of that to pull out some information. Can you see just one screen, or can you see multiple screens? I saw a comment coming up there.
We can see your notes also, Steve. I think you have.
You can see the notes as well.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just see if I can change my share. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Doesn't look like I can change that, so I'm just going to reconfigure my screen.
Do you want to just put it into a presentation mode, Steve?
No, it's okay. Let's see if this works.
Sure.
Can you see a bigger screen now?
Yes, Steve. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool.
Please go ahead.
No worries. Sorry about that. So on top of our statistics, we are producing analysis to pull out insights from that information, and then we need to present that perhaps to our end users and our consumers of that information. And that presentation layer is guiding people through a story in our data to maybe assist with a decision-making process. But typically that route is done on a set of data. If we want our dashboard to be updated on a regular basis, then we need the insights also to be data driven so that our highlights are actually automatically updated based upon the change in the data. So that's an additional layer of complexity and maturity in our reports and our dashboards. And fundamentally, we might then be aiming to achieve the panacea of self-serve, where a user can come to our dashboard and actually be prompted to ask a specific question and still get through to the underlying root cause analysis of what's caused that particular outcome that they identify. That's slightly different to data driven in the sense that the question itself might not be driven by the data, it might be driven by something else in the organization. But then when they come in and they start asking that question of our dashboard, they're still being highlighted and the insights are being drawn to them so that they can get through to the actions and decisions that they want to as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, our people in our teams tend to be spending too much time delivering the statistics and the reports, creating that ad hoc analysis and presenting the ad hoc stories that we're delivering from there. What we want them to be doing is spending more time in that data-driven mode, in that self-serve mode. And that includes our team of analysts and report writers and developers. So we want them to be able to spend more time delivering and writing those data-driven dashboards and those self-serve capabilities and those self-serve products. And we also want our end users and our consumers to be spending more time in those data-driven and those data products which are self-serving for them. Because if they are in there for more, then that means that they're actually asking less ad hoc questions to our reporting team, because the products that we've given to them are meeting more of their requirements. And that means that our reporting and an analytical team can also spend more time being more proactive. So it's not that those other three layers aren't useful, but we want to be spending more time there on a proactive basis so that we can identify things which are going to help improve the performance of our organization by creating additional analysis and presenting that on an ad hoc fashion. Because fundamentally, that's what it's all about, is improving the performance of our organization. So just to be transparent, my hope is during this training session that if you're the right person watching right now, that you're going to want to get in contact with me to discuss our portfolio programs. But that's the only plug I'm going to do. I'll give you my contact details at the end. However, it is important to see today's session in the context of a program that you need to take your team and your organization through. We call that Tableau Training on Tap. I'm not going to go into it in much detail right now, but it's important to see where in context it fits. In that program, we start off with people who are spending too much time report writing, and we deliver agile analysts at the end of it. We take people through 3 different phases. And in each of those phases, we've got multiple modules. The module that we're looking at today is a bring your own data module. It's module 8 of our 9-module program, and it's a subsection of this module that I'm going to go through today. However, my feeling is if you go through and you implement the recommendations that I take you through today, then you should be able to improve the productivity of your teams as a standalone. What we find when people are coming into this stage and into today's training session is that they find that they are building custom solutions every time they need to build a dashboard. They're possibly not driving decisions, just a whole raft of more questions as well. And lastly, it's just taking too long to build solutions in Tableau. And our overall concern then is that our teams can't switch from using their legacy systems, whether that be Excel or something else, over to being Tableau, because they don't have enough knowledge to overcome that barrier. When somebody comes and asks an ad hoc question, is it going to take me 10 minutes in a tool I know already, although it may not be a great solution, or it's going to take me too long in Tableau. So if I don't get over that barrier, then we're not going to be picking up Tableau as our weapon of choice. When we go through the whole of that process, though, what we want to achieve is that our users are able to replace the static reports with dynamic dashboards. That in itself should enable the reduction of the need for ad hoc requests from our end users, which will enable us to then build more powerful tools as well. So there's a snowball effect. By reducing the number of ad hoc requests, we can spend more time on building better data products and more proactive reporting and analytics. And we also want to have a mature, engaged relationship with our stakeholders. So engaging those stakeholders throughout the whole of the process so that we can have more data-driven discussions. And ultimately, we want to be delivering insights more frequently that make better decisions, all of that in less time. That's what we're aiming for. And that's what these recommendations should help you go through. So we're going to cover the 3-2-1 of delivering actionable insights quickly and repeatedly. The first of those is looking at the 3 pillars of visual analytics. Then we're going to look into 2 tools, 2 different ways to help speed up your dashboard development cycles. And the last one is the development process that you can go through to deliver quicker insights and engage your stakeholders throughout. The 3 pillars of visual analytics which are important to consider. The first one is the most obvious one. It's the questions that we want to answer. So we need to get an understanding from our stakeholders about the questions that they're looking to address. And what we want to do is just go a little bit deeper than just the one question. We want to go deeper until we actually understand the root cause that's created the outcome that we're questioning in the first place. And once we understand that root cause, of course, that allows us to start taking actions and decisions within our organization to improve our performance. And what's pertinent there when it comes to dashboard building, of course, is that we need to understand what that drill down path is going to be, because that will define the data we need to actually answer those questions, the drill down path that we're likely to take, and the relationships and structure that we need to put into that data as well. We also need to consider the design aspects. So we want to make sure that we're presenting our data in a way that isn't misleading to our end users. And we don't do it on purpose, but it's very easy to be misleading. And we also want to be presenting and designing that information so that our users don't need to be trained how to use the dashboard per se. It should be intuitive, and they should be able to understand when we're highlighting something that we're highlighting it for a reason, and that they're automatically drawn to those highlights. So the design approach needs to be incorporating best practices so that we aren't misleading people and our users are automatically getting highlights and insights. And lastly, then we need to make sure that our visual analytics process itself is engaging with our stakeholders so that we fully understand, get feedback throughout the whole process to make sure that we are building a product which works and meets their needs, and that they understand and can navigate through automatically to get to the end result. If we combine those correctly, the questions, the design, and the process, then we will enable fast, actionable insights from our dashboards. However, if we only understand the questions that we need to answer and we apply the right design principles, but we don't go through the right build process, we are likely to our users to miss out on insights because they will have poor usage of their dashboards. They won't necessarily understand how to navigate through that dashboard, and they are likely not to therefore drill down to the underlying root causes, and they will miss insights. If, on the other hand, we have the right questions and the right process we've built through, but we haven't got the right design principles applied, then we're going to leave our users to interpret themselves from the dashboard. And that means that they are likely to take longer to get to the end usage, for example, at the end root cause, but they also are likely to be demotivated to use in the first place the dashboard because they're struggling to find the answers on there, and they're going to be less passionate about using their dashboards. So now if we take the right process and the right design principles, but we haven't made sure that we're drilling all the way down to that root cause and we're actually navigating all the way down to the point of taking action, of course, what's going to happen is our end users are just going to interrogate our dashboards. They're going to be unguided questions, and they're not necessarily going to be able to get through to the insight that they need to. There are use cases for data discovery and data interrogation dashboards, but not all of the time. Most of the time we want to be answering specific questions and getting through to what actions we want to take to improve performance, and interrogation approach won't work. So your key takeaways now from the pillars of visual analytics. The questions, define what questions a dashboard will answer and understand what that drill down path is. We talk about the 5 whys because typically if you keep asking the question why, you'll eventually get through to the root cause. Make sure you understand that at the gather requirements phase. In terms of design, don't be tempted to reinvent the wheel all the time. Use what works. It's what the reasons for best practices are out there, and also standardizations. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, and it will help speed up the whole process as well. Aim to highlight insights and not to mislead. And this is a particular chart which was introduced to me by Professor Rolf Hickert when I went through the International Business Communication Standards certification process, which is a best practice approach to reporting and showing information in a way that will not mislead. Here's a chart which is asking the question, is truncating the y-axis dishonest? And of course, in this case, truncating the y-axis is very dishonest because it looks like there's a balance between the yes and no's when there quite clearly isn't. He's German. That's supposed to be a joke. The process is important. We want a collaborative process. We're not just collaborating with our stakeholders, we're also collaborating with other parts of our organization who might have input into our design process, input into the output and what the look and feel of our dashboard is, but also perhaps they've been using that same data set for other reasons, and they may be able to shortcut us through to getting a data pipeline which is working for us, for example. But also in the process, we need to make sure that we are iterating through in multiple times so that we are getting feedback throughout the whole of that process. Now, we will go into this in a bit more detail in this training later on. So that's the 3 pillars of visual analytics. Now I want to go into 2 tools or 2 different ways that you can develop to speed up your dashboard designs. What we're looking for is a balance between flexibility, speed, and ease. When I talk about speed, I'm talking about the speed to market of a new dashboard or new insights, so our developers or analysts are able to produce dashboards quickly. I'm also talking about the speed to insight for the people using that dashboard as well. So we want to make sure that they are getting through and answering those questions as quickly as possible so they can make better decisions. I'm also talking about, from an ease of use perspective, likewise, making sure that your designers and our builders have got a platform which we can easily create dashboards on which are answering the needs, as well as a platform for the consumers and the users of that knowledge so that they know exactly how to get through to the insights that they're looking for. And the first tool we can use very simplistically to facilitate this is the use of templates. Not every organization is doing this right now, but there's a lot of guidance around there. But when I talk about templates, there are 2 types of templates. Excuse me. The first type would be a dashboard layout template, where we know the types of questions that we want to actually ask and answer. We know that we want to present, for example, 4 worksheets, and we want our users to navigate their way through those worksheets in a particular way. Or perhaps I've got another dashboard which has got 10 worksheets and there are KPIs. I want to lay them out in a nice even way so that we get to see a uniform view of our whole organization. So we can build templates which will enable us to lay those tools out. Now, one of the most painful and long-winded things of building a dashboard is actually the formatting of that dashboard, getting the right padding, getting the right coloration, etc., etc. The use of templates significantly increases the speed to market for our analysts who need to build those dashboards. They can use the template, they can replace the placeholders with the sheets they're bringing in. They'll then get the right padding automatically, the right coloration, and any other branding that you want to bring in there. But also, templates can be aimed at types of analysis on charts and worksheets that you are regularly doing. So, for example, you might need to build statistical process control charts, and SPC as they're called, on a regular basis in your organization because they are being used in your industry sector. It therefore would make sense to actually build a template SPC chart for various reasons. The first one is that we can then apply it to any new data source quite quickly and rapidly. We get the 80% to the finished product quickly. We just need some fine tuning to finish it off. But also you're de-skilling the needs required to build that SPC chart. It may be that a particular dashboard builder in a particular department doesn't create many SPC charts at all, maybe once or twice a year. But because they're being used throughout the whole of the organization, they can then pluck that template. There'll be some guidelines in there as to how they can apply that to a new data set. And hey presto, they're much quicker to getting an SPC chart. So you're de-skilling the needs there, but you're also speeding things up, and you're also applying consistency. And that consistency is useful from an ease of use perspective to your end user. So your end user is seeing the same types of charts presented in the same manner, so they get familiarity with how you're presenting that data, and they can understand those charts more readily. And of course, the ease of use is applied to the the designer as well. So if I'm only creating 2 SPCs in a year, then that template's quite clearly going to be easy for me to use if I've got some good guidelines to do it. And yes, we've got multiple different layouts. We've got multiple different charts that we need to use. So we'll have multiple templates which will be required. And that then gives us the flexibility that we need within our organization. And to improve all of this, the second tool that you should be developing, in my recommendation, is a style guide. So that style guide incorporates 2 facets. It incorporates the corporate branding that you need to implement, so the colors, the fonts, the sizes, etc., as well as things like the padding and the layout. But it also incorporates best practice, whether it be at the dashboard template layout. So we're going to make sure that we're laying things out. There's enough white space. We're not overcrowding things. We're not trying to do too much. But also at the worksheet level, when we're actually designing something, we can apply best practice in terms of the format and layout, the use of the correct use of colors, etc., etc. So those style guides should be driving the design of the templates. So even though it's point 2, it's probably a good idea to have those style guides in a good shape before you start finalizing your templates. But also, as analysts, we tend to apply the 80-20 rule to everything else except for ourselves. But let's apply the 80-20 rule to ourselves. 80% of the work we do, we should be able to cover off with 20% of the template layouts that we need for our dashboard. 80% of the deliverables of the analysis we need to do, we should be able to cover off with about 20% of the different charts that we can do. So we can reduce the number of templates we need if we apply that 80-20 rule and we just focus on the ones which deliver the most. So that 80-20 rule. And then the remaining workload effort can still be reduced a little bit by having those style guides. So if I need to build a layout on a dashboard which isn't in a template yet, then I can still apply the style guide approach to get that layout more quickly laid, so I don't have to make decisions on everything from scratch. The style guides are helping me. And likewise, if I need to build a new chart for which I don't have a template, again, I can apply the style guides to slightly improve the speed of delivery on that ad hoc piece of analysis as well. The takeaways from this section then, the ways to speed up your dashboard designs. The style guides, they should incorporate best practice and your corporate branding requirements. Now, I loosely add corporate branding because it's fundamentally something that enterprises need. But for example, if you're presenting a dashboard internally, quite often people insist on having the logo in the top right or the top left of their dashboard. Personally, I think if it's an internal presentation, most of the people you're presenting to will know who they work for, and you're just taking up space on your dashboard with that. So just be careful you don't go over the top. The style guides themselves can increase the speed to insight through the application of best practice. So the way to highlight things which you're bringing out and bringing to attention to people, and then de-emphasizing things which aren't needing to be highlighted, for example, the best use of color, etc., etc. All of this is about applying visual best practices because it will increase the speed to insight for the usage of your charts and your dashboards. And of course, the style guides, as I mentioned, can also decrease the design time when you're building a new chart or a new dashboard. So we minimize the number of choices we want, and your analysts can focus on the analytical aspect that they want to be doing. And then the style guide can reduce time built to produce the end product. The templates then, as I mentioned, should be incorporating all of those style guide facets. They clearly increase the speed to develop a dashboard. They can also increase the speed to develop charts as well, but they also increase the speed to insight through the consistency. And this is one of the things that the IBCS, the International Business Communication Standards, talks about a lot, is that firstly, if the more consistently we approach an analytical approach and present that information, people are going to be more familiar with it. So quite often your users, of course, are actually receiving dashboards from different parts of your organization. If those different parts of the organization are applying the same approach, then it's much easier for your end users. Simple example would be, how do we show actual data versus budget data versus forecast data? If we have a consistent approach to doing that, I can look at charts from different parts of my organization and I know exactly what the different approach is and what that means. So we will need to build our dashboard layout templates, and we will also want to create chart format templates to cover off that 80-20 rule. You won't necessarily need one for bar charts, but if, for example, coming back to the SPC example, you want to do something which is just a line chart but with lots of referencing and bands on there, for example, then it would make a lot of sense, especially if you've got certain test criteria that you want to apply to your statistical process control charts to do the highlighting for you. So apply that 80-20 rule. Resources available to you to help you go through this process. These ones are on Tableau Public. And in a moment, I would encourage you to take a screenshot if you want to actually use some of this. And I'll tell you when to do that. So on Tableau Public, there's great Tableau style guides already available for you. So these have been available for you to use as a starting point to develop your own style guide. It's a great resource for you. We've got Camden McRae, which is a Tableau style guide. We've got JLL Business Intelligence style guidance for Tableau. I've put the exact name in there so you can Google that or search for that rather on Tableau Public. Likewise, BBC Audiences Tableau style guide. But the JLL one I'm familiar with. The JLL have got a tremendous team of Tableau experts who've provided that style guide, brought it together, and open sourced it effectively for other organizations to use. And at the bottom, you've also got a fantastic Tableau dashboard layout template by Jeff Plattner. So that's got a whole bunch of different layouts that you can use as a starting point for your templates for dashboard layouts. Other resources, we got some blog posts. So Andy Kriebel's done an absolutely fantastic, it's a mini series on how I use, or how he uses dashboard containers. That's a great video series for you to look at to make sure you're actually understanding how the containers all work and pull together so that you can create your templates in a way which is then easier for you to translate and apply different worksheets and different data sets to. And also, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Jovan Lekovic, how we made the BBC Audiences style guide. So that obviously complements the BBC Audiences Tableau style guide. So those 6 resources, take a screenshot now. You can Google those exact names and you'll find them very quickly. Of course, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other resources out there, which will be in this domain specifically around templates and best practice, especially, and how you can build and develop your style guides. Depending on where you are in your journey, though, I would strongly recommend just focusing initially just on those 6, because that's going to get you a lot of what you need to actually build up your own style guides and build your own templates from scratch. So predominantly, of course, I've focused there on the dashboard layout templates, which is a great starting point. Over time, you'll probably want to then use other blog posts based upon the specific type of chart that you're looking to build, so that you can build your own templates for charts. But take a snapshot of those. I'm on the Tableau Public. The last time I checked, all 4 of those resources were available for download. So not only do you get to read them and see them, but you can actually download those documents and start to configure them. So it's very kind of the authors to do that. The last section is about processing. Is about a process to deliver quicker insights and engage your stakeholders. There's a lot of nuance in this whole process. And of course, like most of this presentation is about collating and aggregating information from lots of different places and bring it into something which you can put in practice. But it's important to understand the details of what we're talking about specifically in this process. We're talking about an agile BI process. When we kick off, obviously we would need to gather requirements. And I talked about the 5 whys earlier on. It's important that we understand our requirements so that we can drill down to the point of action. And that means asking our stakeholders about, okay, so once you've got that the answer to that question, what's the next question you're likely to answer? And depending on the data, of course, might be spinning off into different directions, and you need to understand which different directions they are and how far they need to go in order to actually take a decision and make action, because that process will allow you to get the right data to actually go through that whole path. And very often, of course, it may be that it's too complex. It's going to take me absolutely ages to get all of the data. Just get some data. You may only be able to go a certain distance down there in your first iteration, but it's much better to actually get some traction and some movement in the early stages and then spin the wheels off of getting more detailed data if that's the case. So do that in parallel. But what we want to do is get the data we can as quickly as possible, which is relevant for these requirements, and realize the limitation that our first dashboard may have based upon the fact that we don't have all the right data in there. Because once we've got that data, we can start looking at it for data quality. We can start looking to see how we can augment it with other data we can easily get. We can look at how we can add some structure in that data, whether it be through hierarchies or blending in or uniting in other data sets as well, of course. And then also adding calculated fields so that we get the right metrics, and perhaps we're already thinking about, based upon the requirements, which things are needed to be highlighted. So maybe there's some calculated fields there. But from that point, we can then start analyzing the data we've got. And it may be just a one-off download at this moment. We can start analyzing it. And again, let's apply that 80-20 rule. 80% of the analysis you do at this stage, you're going to throw away. But the 20% you're left with will be sort of golden nuggets. And it'll be that 20% that you're thinking about, how do I then want to bring this together so we can actually start meeting our requirements in the best way? And at this point, you're looking at designing the layout of your dashboard. And I strongly recommend, as a number of other people do, to do this process through a wireframing process and step away from the Tableau desktop. There are good reasons to want to do that. By wireframing in Tableau, which is more than possible, in the earlier stages of your capabilities on Tableau, that's a big no-no, because what tends to happen then is you're restricted in doing fairly basic things, and so you end up with fairly basic dashboards because you're wireframing immediately with your own capability, which is quite limited at the start. But also you tend to start getting dragged away from how you're going to navigate around things and how the user wants to use that. And you get sucked into the data and analyzing that as well while you're wireframing it. So strongly recommend step away from Tableau at this phase, do a wireframe process. It can be in PowerPoint, it can be in some other software tools that you might use, but pen and paper is nearly just as good. And it may well be that actually you get to a point where you're using PowerPoint slides and you've got multiple templates that you're using as a starting point for your whole wireframing. Because what you want to be able to do is do an internal team design with a little bit of bouncing off some other people that have been there and done it before in your organization. And then you sit in front of your stakeholders to review your wireframe. So you're not reviewing this in Tableau, you're still reviewing it in the wireframe, and you're talking through the process of how and what they can actually achieve through each of the different sheets in your view, and maybe they're going to navigate over, maybe there's going to be a filter which is then going to filter down on another, so you can talk through that whole process and get their feedbacks, and then go back to the drawing board and reconfigure your wireframe before you go into building your first dashboard and testing your first dashboard. And the test at this point really is just a functional, does it do what I think it should be doing? Is everything working okay? Because once I've actually got something which is working okay, we should be publishing that as quickly as possible and getting that version in front of some of our stakeholders, not all of them. And I'm referring here to version 0.1 because we want to make it very clear that it's not the finished product at this point. By no means is it going to be the finished product. I don't know exactly what's going to be the limitations. Maybe it's data, maybe it's functionality, maybe there's some other things that we need to bring in. But at this point, it's very much not a finished product, but it should be good enough to get some usage, some value from it. So what we're going to do by publishing it is we're going to solicit user feedback from a discrete set of users at this point. So they may be deemed to be our beta testers. And we're going to get that feedback from those people so that we can go into the next sprint. So our next sprint will be version 0.2. It may be that based upon the user feedback, we realize that we need different data coming into our dashboard and our worksheets. It may be that in version 0.1, we identified some data that we wanted to get hold of, but it was going to take us too long. Now it's come in, so we can bring that additional data and augment our data sources with that. It may be that we need to put in additional structure. We maybe our users have pointed out that there's some data quality issues which need to be addressed, and maybe some way to do that. Likewise, then once we've got that new data, we're going to want to go back and do our analysis. Maybe there's new analysis. Maybe the dashboard analysis wasn't as good as we thought it was in terms of diving down to get to the action points. So we need some new analysis, or perhaps it's because we've got new data. But likewise, you always want to go through that process again. And again, go back to the design process. So depending on your maturity of your version 1.1, this may be starting again from scratch in your wireframing in pen and paper or PowerPoint, or it may be that you can actually use Tableau at this point for your jigging around and discussion with your team as to what you might want to the finished article to be. It may be that you're close enough to do that, but don't assume that you are. It's always a good idea to go back to the drawing board sometimes. And likewise, then we're going to review again with that bigger, wider net of users that we want to be publishing this to, because we're going to expand our usage base. So we want to review with the stakeholders, make sure that we got the a good understanding from their feedback, and we're putting that into play. You can't meet everybody's requirements, of course, so you need to, again, play that 80-20 rule and just focus on what you can deliver. Then we're going to publish after our build and test process, and we've done version 0.2, and the cycle can continue. The only caveat I'll say there is this process also allows us to take a step back at this point and ask the question is, what should we do next? Is our time best spent improving this particular dashboard, or actually is it good enough to get some value from it at the moment, but we've identified other challenges in the organization which require our attention, so we can fork our time off into that direction? Or it may be that the feedback came that we need a complementary dashboard and we need to tie those two dashboards together, so we might need to go to version 0.1, or maybe there's another dashboard which needs some enhancements because of the work we've done here as well. But it allows us to take that step back. What's important is that we don't let time expand, and we don't let changing requirements expand our delivery process. What we should really do is have a time-bound sprint delivery process, and any additional needs that we identify on the way get put into the product backlog. Anything which challenges our ability to deliver in that time schedule, where possible, we're going to then also demote in terms of time, so that we deliver on a regular basis. Why? Because that gives us the great opportunity to engage with our stakeholders more regularly, and they can see more quick change. They'll also understand the process a little bit better, and they'll learn how they can talk to you better about their requirements going forwards as well. So that regular communication points is really, really useful. If you're constantly having to say, sorry, the dashboard's a week late, another week late, another week late, then obviously that's not just demotivated stakeholders, but you're also not getting proper feedback and engagement with them during those extended weeks as well. So bear that in mind. So your key takeaways from this section: build up a product backlog from user requirements and plan dashboard features into those sprints. Try and get them time-bound sprints. Typically, we're talking about maybe 2-week sprints, maybe a 4-week sprint, but stick with something that works for you and your organization, and try not to delay production or publishing from that. Why? Because we want to stop hitting the snooze button on our dashboards. And I think you all know what I mean. Every morning, your alarm goes off and you go, oh, 9 more minutes sleep, I'm just going to press that button, and you snooze, and actually you don't really get 9 more minutes sleep at all, do you? And I don't know how many times you do that, but 3 or 4 times, and you're not really adding any value. What is best is to actually get your dashboard into published and tested with trusted users, and that's a key aspect. Is that we're going to take a sample of stakeholders who we trust, who we know are quite enthusiastic and are going to give us good constructive feedback, and potentially are already bought on the process. So depending on where your organization is already in terms of your Tableau deployment or in terms of its data literacy journey, then maybe that sample is larger or smaller. But look to grow that as you continue are implementing more and more dashboards, because the more people use Tableau, the more dashboards that are meeting their needs, the bigger that sample gets, and your beta testers gets larger and larger. just put disclaimers on your dashboards. If you know there are problems with it and you don't want to publish because of those problems, then I suggest that most of the time you can just put a disclaimer on there instead and say, look, don't try to use this for these purposes. The data isn't accurate enough because for these reasons and for these purposes. So as long as people understand its limitations and that there is still some value of actually being able to use and analyze that the dashboard or use a dashboard, then you're going to be able to get user feedback based upon that. And it's also sometimes, quite often, that what we think is really important is fundamentally just not meeting a user requirement anyway. And it significantly delays what we implement. And we get that from the user feedback by actually putting it out there and saying, look, this disclaimer is going to take us a day to fix. This disclaimer is going to take us 4 weeks to fix. How important are these two compared to each other? And keep the dashboard published until it's been proven that it's not fit for purpose. And withdraw it if it isn't, or continue it in production if it is, while the next version is being built. So when you obviously publish your 0.2 on top of your 0.1, people have started making subscriptions or data-driven alerts, for example, then you're not wasting that and throwing those away potentially, and you're maintaining momentum through that. Or maybe you need to actually revise and design something completely different. Maybe that it's version 1.0 and you need to throw everything away and start from scratch again. But you'll understand much better what your needs are through that process. And as you go through and you're going into the next round, then obviously you want to expand that user base and then repeat from steps 2 onwards. So those are the 3, 2, 1s. The way I see it is you've only got 3 simple choices to make as to how you can then implement those processes and those recommendations into your organization. You've got the choice of just doing it yourself, going ahead, identifying your style guides, building up your style guides, looking at all the templates you need to build, and then engaging with your designers and developers and getting them upskilled to that point that they can also engage with their stakeholders better as well. Or you could do DFY, which is getting somebody else to do it for you, going to an external organization, bringing them in to maybe build up your style guides, build up your templates, etc., etc. The last option then is done with you. So this is a style we take, by the way. So we look to enable the current resources we've got as best as we possibly can and potentially augment them if necessary. But the idea is that you actually implement this built into your daily activities rather than taking everybody away, and because you haven't got time to do that anyway, or bringing in some expensive resources to do it for you. Now, I said I wouldn't do a sales pitch. I'm not going to do a sales pitch. What I'm going to do in the true Tableau style, though, is give you the opportunity to still like an artist. So C is what we do with our organizations, and we do it by taking them through a 9-step program, which I showed you earlier. I'm going to go through that again now in a bit more detail, but just to give you a little bit of flavor of the things that you can do should you want to implement that process yourself in a do-it-yourself approach. So the program we call is Tableau Training on Tap. We split it into 3 separate phases that we're going to deliver. So the first phase is the design phase, and this is about getting those user requirements understood well enough with the 5 whys, for example, making sure that your team actually understand what Tableau can do and how do you get data into it and how can you manipulate that data to produce the key performance indicators that you need. And then we go through the develop phase, which is developing 2 things. Firstly, it's developing the skills needed by your team to build stuff in Tableau, but it's also then developing analysis on your data so that you get that pot of analysis that we're going to do the 80-20 rule on later on. And then the final phase is deliver. So we're going to deliver those dashboards which create value for your organization and enable your stakeholders. That whole process then is converting or transforming people who are just spending too much time reporting and doing ad hoc work reactively based upon requests from other parts of your organization, and transforming them into agile analysts. And the first thing I would say is obviously different teams need different approaches to this in terms of how much time they need to take, how quick they're going to be picking things up. In my experience, there's a whole bunch of people out there where Tableau isn't what they use every minute of the day. And there's quite a lot of people like that. And this program and the approach that you can take needs to be tailored based upon their skills and their time availability. What we do is we spread this whole program over a 12-week period so that we're not trying to intensely get people up to speed too quickly. That means means that they can actually do their day job with a little bit of support. And if they're going to be using Tableau to do some stuff, it means that they can actually use this process to enable some of the things they would need to do anyway. So they actually start to learn and apply. And what we do is we have a whole bunch of exercises which are on training data, but through the process, we encourage people to apply the learning directly to their own data. And that's done for multiple reasons. The first thing is that it's a great idea to learn something in a theoretical data set first of all, so you can learn the basics, but then applying it to your own data does a couple of things. It puts things into context. And what we find is that people tend to ask better questions when they're applying that theory to their own data. So they can ask real questions and they understand the principles better, but also it means that they can actually start producing analysis from an early stage as well and start to ask questions. And when they start to ask questions, they tend to go a little bit deeper than the theory that you're going through anyway. And those are much more natural progressions that they're going to ask because it's data they're interested in and answers they actually want. So the design phase, understanding Tableau, that kicks off with just really motivating everybody, because not everybody likes to change. Everybody needs to understand why Tableau is actually quite an important process for them to learn and pick up on. I was just looking at the note there from Sigal. So motivating people right at the very beginning is really important, because not everybody wants to change and go through the pain of learning something new. And then transforming data, that's really just understanding how we get things into Tableau, how we then can structure the data so that we can, when we gather our requirements from our end users, we can actually fully understand how deep we need to go in order to understand the cascade from question down to action, down to dimensions, down to measures, before we start thinking about building charts, which is the process we go through in this journey. Then once we've designed what we need to, the outcome we're looking for, not necessarily how we're going to present it, but the outcome, then we go through developing our skills. And you know, if I can do something in some other product, I need to understand how I do it in Tableau. So we create charts, but remembering that we are applying things to data. One of the reasons why we teach how to do a calculated fields quite deeply at an early stage is it allows people to apply these things to their own data much more frequently. What we do is we provide coaching calls. So I recommend you do a similar setup where you have a regular gathering where people can just say, look, you know what, I was trying to do X, Y, Z and apply this to my own data, but it's a different shape and I've got different needs. Can you help me through that? So you want that sort of internal support structure where you can help people overcome those little barriers as early on as possible, because that's what tends to put people off and then switch back to their old legacy Excel system if they can't overcome those barriers. So having those support structure in place really helps. Once you've gone through the creating of charts, then we start getting a little bit more complex with combining multiple data sets and how we can augment our data, bring that together so that we can analyze our information and start formatting and structuring the charts in a way that we're automatically identifying insights from our data. Then we can go through that process of actually learning how to build a dashboard and go through the mechanics first. So that's in module 7. So go through the mechanics of how dashboard containers works and how all the different objects works and how the interactivity and the actions work. And then we can go back to all the analysis that we've been building throughout all of these steps before, do the 80-20 rule, identify the 20% of the analysis that we want to bring in, and then go back and look to see how we want to lay out our dashboards to get the best insights and get the best navigation through that process, so that we can then publish our version 0.1 during the program and hand it over to our stakeholders. And in module 9, we obviously want to make sure that we're adding the most value to our stakeholders. So we live in a very noisy world, and we can't just publish loads of dashboards and expect people to want to go in there and pull out their insights. We want to be highlighting and identifying when they need to go in there based upon maybe data-driven alerts, for example, or the right level of subscription, so that we only pull them into the platform when there's something valuable for them to get out of it. And so we don't become part of the noise, we become part of the solution. So that was me quickly running through. I think we've got about 12 minutes left for Q&A. In case we don't answer all of the questions or you want to get in contact with me, there's these 3 means of doing so. So you can either write to me at steve@vizdj.com. There's no spaces in there, but that's just for ease of reading. Likewise, I do quite a bit of micro blogging on LinkedIn. So if you want to follow me or connect with me on LinkedIn, there's my details. Again, if you want to take a screenshot of this and you can get in contact later on, or you can follow me on Twitter. That's visual__DJ with no spaces. So
thank you, Steve. Sorry.
No problem at all. I was just coming on to the Q&A, so I was just going to hand back to you anyway. There's a Q&A. That's my iceberg, which is how I normally depict our Q&A session normally goes.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. I think thank you for sharing all great frameworks, resources with everyone. So if you have any question for Steve, you can just go ahead and put it in the chat. Happy to go ahead and ask him. Steve, apart from the frameworks you talked about, one question I have is in terms of, and this is something I have gone ahead and experienced with a lot of my customers, that they are not able to go ahead and boost the adoption of the dashboards. Maybe you talked about in terms of the way they have designed it, maybe something wrong is with that, because this is something I have seen with a lot of customers. They have some great dashboards on the Tableau server, but no one from the executive team is using it. So what will be your advice in that case?
It's a very good question, and you've got to understand obviously why the executive team aren't using the dashboards, and there are multiple reasons for that. We've talked about data literacy very briefly, and that's normally one aspect. Is quite often executives don't want to be sitting in front of a computer screen analyzing dashboards. They want insights directly to them. So in that scenario, it's all about questioning your stakeholders and understanding why they're not using the dashboards in the first place. Another aspect, of course, we mentioned subscriptions. So it's a good way to set up subscriptions or data-driven alerts so that the users are being pulled into the platform at the most appropriate time. That's one aspect. If you believe your dashboard is meeting their requirements, then those alerts can actually bring them in to identify things which meet the certain criteria. And that's why data-driven alerts are so cool. But it really comes down to making sure that you're having a mature conversation, and sometimes actually just watching your executive use your dashboard is a really good learning experience to see what they're doing. And then you may realize actually there's a design issue or there's a layout issue, or you haven't actually presented something in a way that they need to see it.
Thank you, Steve. And Ben is asking you, and he has just posted a question. How have you gone about constructing this framework? Is it synthesized mostly from experience or other non-analytics focused dev frameworks?
No, it's absolutely through experience, Ben. It's a good question. Thank you. So my background is originally started off as an accountant. I try not to admit that too often, but I very quickly got into analyzing quite large amounts of data. And I was doing commercial analysis and operational analysis as well as financial analysis, and doing a lot of strategic analysis in terms of price and valuations of acquisitions, for example. And then I moved out of industry and worked with small and medium-sized enterprises to help them grow their businesses. And one of my clients actually ran a business intelligence consultancy and asked me to come on board and take over. So I ran a business intelligence consultancy for quite some time, which was doing development work with enterprises. We were also doing training work as well and using various different tool sets. And then I got introduced as part of that process to Tableau about 7 years ago. So I've been using Tableau for the last 7 years, implementing it in organizations, public and private sector. And I've also set up my own company 4 years ago because I really wanted to just focus on Tableau because I've enjoyed it so much and I just wanted to impart my knowledge. So no, it's been built and synthesized over many years. And obviously I'm constantly looking to grow and learn myself from the wonderful community that we have around Tableau as well.
Thank you, Steve. And just continuing that, Ramakrishnan is asking, so the business users are keen on having all the Viz in a single screen with drill down dimensions. Your views on how to change that mindset of the end users?
It comes back to just asking them, so what? You know, what are you going to do with this information? And trying to encourage them to realize that actually it's very easy to navigate from one dashboard to another one based upon the questions they ask and the answers they get. So if we focus on enough discrete questioning on one dashboard, we're going to get to a decent answer. It may not allow us to take action at that point, but it may trigger off another questioning fork, which will then take us into another dashboard. And having a cleaner layout and is easier to navigate, and it's certainly a lot easier to understand. It's not an easy process, and I often use the phrase we need to give people what they ask for and not what they need as a starting point. Because if we keep saying no too often and not letting people do and get what they want, they're going to be demotivated as stakeholders anyway. What we then need to do is supplement what they've asked for with better ways to do what they really need to achieve. And it's a journey you need to take your end users on, and it's not a quick journey. We talk a lot about whether or not, for example, we should allow people to download data from a dashboard, and there's people say yes you should, and other people say no you shouldn't. The question is you've got to ask yourself why they need to do it and why they want to do it, and then you can start slowly taking them away and getting them into a situation where they understand that actually putting everything onto one dashboard is not allowing them to see everything that they need to see. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank you, Steve. I think Michael is asking you in terms of what's the poster on the wall behind you?
This one up here is it's actually the International Business Communication Standards poster, which looks at 99 different bad practices that people have and suggests better practices from a visualization perspective. It's something I'm very passionate about, is simplifying the ability to present information. And Dr. Jürgen Feist, who managing director of the institute, is also a pianist, and he does a wonderful presentation which talks about how fantastically brilliant our brain is at recognizing patterns. And he talks about the complexity of music and how if you can read music, you can read things, very, very complex things, and actually put that into action immediately. So you can see a difficult piece of music and actually play it without having seen it before. When it comes to business communications, though, if you Google dashboards, we all know that you're going to get a plethora of different ways of presenting information. And the IBCS looks at standardizing that approach so that we can actually use the power of pattern recognition, which we have in our brains, and they apply that to the business communications that we want to put in front of our users. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Steve. I want to switch gears over here. I want to talk about you now. Do you want to talk about your journey, how you got started with Tableau? What has been the role of Tableau community, Tableau public, if you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, blimey. As I said, I started off as an accountant, which is another way of saying I lived in Excel hell. And to be fair, I enjoyed Excel. But when I first got introduced to Tableau, I think it was 7 years ago now, I saw the speed of delivering analytics and was amazed by it. And I got very much sucked into using it and working with our clients at the time, because I was running a consultancy practice then. And I learned through the community. In fact, I personally didn't go on a training course apart from, I think, an 8-hour training course, and I'm self-trained and self-learned through that community. And it's taken me 5 or 6 years to get to the level I am right now, through a huge amount of invested time. But the things that you can learn in the community are widespread and deep, and it's an amazing place. I actually curate a newsletter called Tableau Bites, which is really just a homage to all the people that write these fantastic blogs. Because I read so many blogs, I just cherry pick the ones which I think are the best for me at that moment in time, and I share that with my newsletter. So it's great to see the community growing. It's an amazing place, and it's very, very supportive as well. I mean, I find the forums, for example, are incredible. Normally, if you Google something, you're going to get an answer, but if you can't, the forums are incredibly supportive as well. I've really enjoyed learning Tableau, and I don't think anybody ever knows Tableau. It's one of those. It's a toolkit, and you can do anything with it. And just like with Excel, there's always 5 different ways to answer the same question. So there's always new ways to learn, and depending on the circumstances, there's a better approach. But there's no one way to do something. So I love. That's why I started my own company, because I wanted to spend only time working with Tableau, which is what I do now. So I'm having a whale of a time.
Thank you, Steve. And I think that inspires everyone over here in the community. What will be your advice for someone who is just starting with Tableau?
Enjoy it. I think the quick advice, you see it before, is it's always best to actually apply it to your own data, because you're going to start learning it much more quickly. So yes, there are some great training data sets out there, and there's some fantastic initiatives which I strongly recommend you join. but try to apply it to your own data as quickly as possible. And think of it as an analytical tool first and foremost, as opposed to a presentation layer. And the reason why I say that is because when you start analyzing something, you don't know the best way to present it. So let Tableau help you discover that. Don't say to yourself, I'm going to present this in a bar chart, or I'm going to present this in a tree map. You need to start analyzing it and finding what insights are coming out of it before you decide the best way to start presenting something. But apply it to your own data as much as you can. And pick it up daily. If you can only pick it up for 15 minutes a day, still do that. Pick up Tableau 15 minutes, ask a quick question on your own data, and you will learn incredibly quickly.
Thank you, Steve. I think with that, Steve, it was an honor to have you on VizConnect. Thank you for sharing the framework. Thank you for sharing your best practices, all your advices on how we can go ahead and improve the impact of Tableau. And I will highly recommend. Thank you, Steve. I will highly recommend go ahead and subscribe to Steve's newsletter. That is something which I really look forward to. And I will go ahead and share the details with the video, how you can do that. But Steve, thank you for inspiring everyone. And yeah, it was great to have you on VizConnect.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.